This episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast is brought to you by Howell Wealth Management. On the Helping Healing Humor podcast, we talk about anxiety and stress and its impact on our everyday lives. We know that finances, including planning for retirement, is one of the leading causes of stress. It can be confusing and overwhelming. There are differing opinions on the best approach. It can be hard to know who to trust. For our retirement planning, Whitney and I trust Greg Howell of Howell Wealth Management at Northwestern Mutual. Greg is professional, knowledgeable, and accessible. He looks at the whole picture and thinks outside the box to create ways to help you reach your financial goals. Retirement planning can be especially challenging for ministers who do not have the benefit of a 401k, but Greg's expertise and creativity can get you on the right path and give you confidence for the future. Text him to schedule your free 15-minute consultation today at 931-638-1576. Be sure to tell him Ben and Travis sent you. Welcome into the Helping Healing Humor podcast with Ben and Travis, coming to you from Mars Hill Bible School. Just wrapped up the Freedom 5K, the third annual BATify Freedom 5K. Blingy medals. If you missed out, I hate it for you. You actually can still get the t-shirt. You can buy that. Support us, St. Jude. You can also come see us at the Staying Alive Disco Dodgeball Tournament, August 20th, that weekend. If we got enough teams, it may bleed into Sunday afternoon. But We'll start Saturday morning. We'd love to have your youth group there with us. It'll be a good time and all that good stuff. But today, we wanted to discuss a few things. Mentioned in the last episode that we had a few questions. We had a question answer session at Maywood Christian Camp, the greatest place on earth. Mm-hmm. And we decided that maybe we would bring some of those on to the podcast. We had some submitted in question answer, some questions submitted later that people would like for us to cover. And so today we're going to do that yet again. And today we're going to talk about intrusive thoughts. And I thought this was a great one, something that I think a lot of us have dealt with. If you live long enough, you've had that thought that kind of crossed your brain. And so to get us started, Ben, why don't you tell us what intrusive thoughts are?
Well, I think some of what you just said really defines it. It's just an unwanted thought. It's something that passes through your head, something that you think, and a lot of times, some of those intrusive thoughts end up being some things that you're not comfortable with, whether it's of a sexual nature. Sometimes there's a passing thought that goes through your mind. It might be of an angry thought towards someone. It could be something that's just a worry about somebody that's going to get hurt, about death. There's people who sometimes have those even intrusive thoughts about suicide. And the thing to understand about the intrusive thought is that just because you have that thought doesn't mean that you are looking to act upon that thought. I know that we have oftentimes religiously, I think that's where we struggle with intrusive thoughts because, we talk about as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. We sometimes think of the idea of lust that Jesus talked about in the Sermon on the Mount, and those thoughts coming and anger and hatred in your heart. So there's definitely a difference, though, in the intrusive thought and the thoughts that you continually meditate on and want to happen. If it's something that, and I've said this a lot of times, if it's something you are struggling with, then that is certainly not something where you're falling into temptation or wanting to do so. You are trying not to. And so you have some levels of this. Everybody has intrusive thoughts. Yeah. Everybody has a thought cross their brain and they go, wow, that was weird. That was uncalled for. That was something that, like, where did that come from kind of thing?
Well, there's that aspect that Paul speaks to, take every thought captive, which in itself means that even Paul had thoughts that he had to submit to Christ. Like, this is not Christ-like, and so I'm submitting that to you. And that aspect of it, we read Scripture and we go, man, that's a direct command, and it is. And I'm not saying that it's not got the full authority of God, but what I'm saying is we oftentimes leave off the inference there that obviously they've had things that they were not Christ-like, and they dealt with them. And it was one of those deals where you have to intentionally go, I'm putting this at the foot of the cross. I'm giving this to God. I'm going to let him handle it. And so I think that helps us with the human side of the people who wrote the Bible, the humanity of Jesus, that yes, there's a direct command, but there's a reason why there's a direct command, because they've experienced that and they know how to deal with it. And of course, one of our great statements that we make all the time, not because we make it makes it great, but because it's true, anything that you've went through has equipped you to help someone else do just that.
And there's a lot of people who deal with this. So there's a story in a book that I've read recently, and I'll have to, it's a long title for the book. It's OCD, anxiety, depression, and panic attacks and related depression. It's a really long book. And I think it's by Callaghan and Shaw are the authors. And in that, actually, I don't think they're the ones who use this example. That's a great book, and we'll talk about some points from it. But there's actually another one that's just on unwanted thoughts or on intrusive thoughts. And in it, it uses this illustration of a sitting on the bank of a river. We're enjoying the day. We're sitting on the river, and all of a sudden we see a bag or something floating down the river. Now, for most people, if this is your mind and these are your thoughts, the intrusive thought is this bag floating down the river. Most of us go, wow, there's a bag floating down the river, and we let it go. We don't really get bothered by it. We don't feel the need to jump in the river and swim and get it and examine it. Most people, with that intrusive thought go, wow, it was weird. I don't know why I thought that, and they let it go. Someone with obsessive compulsive disorder or someone who struggles with the intrusive thoughts bothering them, which usually turns into OCD. We give OCD a pretty hard time sometimes. We joke about it. We've joked about even with Will, OCD about having things perfectly. Just because I want something perfect doesn't necessarily mean I've got OCD. These people who would see this intrusive thought, they would have this thought that somebody is going to die, or they have this thought that something bad's going to happen. And then they can't rest until they go jump in the water, grab the purse, bring it out, look at it, and then a few minutes later, it's floating down the river again. So it's a miserable thing. If someone truly suffers with obsessive compulsive disorder, it's miserable, and they really they can't rest because is always, and it may be one thing, it may be a lot of different things, but these intrusive thoughts are constant with them, and it really tortures them sometimes. And so some of you out there may be listening and go, I know what you're talking about. Like, I have that. And, the compulsions come in where we usually kind of see that is we don't see the thoughts, but what we see is they've got to open the door so many times, or they got to turn the light switches off and on so many times, or they've got to go through so many red lights, or they've got to call out that there's a cloud in the sky, or somebody is going to die in their family. I mean, there's things like that are intrusive thoughts that then you build these compulsions that make you feel better, but they only make you feel better for a minute or two, or for an hour. And then all of a sudden you're having it again.
Gotcha. What are some practical ways that we can deal with these thoughts? And I'll use an example from my life. A little while after my diagnosis, any room that I went into with a human being, so we went to a foster parent training class, and we would go in, sit down, the class would start, and I would begin to think of how everyone in the room might die because death and the struggle and those things were at the forefront of my mind. And you debate on, do I share that with people? What am I going to do? The last episode, we talked about our group text, and one of the first things I did was text you. I may have texted you and Will, I'm not sure, but if I didn't, Will now knows. But I text you like, hey, I'm having this thought. Is this normal? Is this, and sometimes I think we want to, not that I have OCD and I'm not putting myself in that mode, but it is an intrusive thought. We want someone to not go, hey, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. What are you doing?
Yeah, that's probably not the helpful way to do it.
Yes. Which you didn't do, by the way. That's not what happened.
I think in those events, certain things open up our world a little bit more. Your cancer diagnosis opened up your world to that we are human, and that the mortality got a little bit more.
It's a little right there on the nose.
I mean, it was right on the nose. So it's very common for something like that to happen. I know for me, you know, going back to my story from a long time ago, when my girlfriend was killed in a car accident, there was a long time before I could walk in a hospital without having some anxiety. That's not necessarily an intrusive thought per se, but it was because of the events that created that kind of, you know, that I was dealing with. So a lot of times you have that. There may be just a very small amount of time that it bothers you, and then it could be something that you've dealt with your whole life. There could be a reason, like with Travis's, it was kind of what was going on in the moment made those thoughts pop in more often. And then it may be something that truly has struggled with. It may change from one thing to the next. A lot of people with obsessive compulsive disorder, it changes over time. There'll be times where this thing bothers them, or this intrusive thought, or they may have 3 or 4 of them. So how do we deal with those? Like, you know, what do we do in those moments? There's the 3 points that I mentioned. The people who wrote the book, Callaghan and Shaw, they wrote this. They talked about these 3 things. They're not new, by the way. There are a lot of people who have kind of talked about this in the past, or at least used some of the same thoughts that they have, but they just kind of put it in a simple way. And basically it's these 3 things, and it's just accept, embrace, and control. And that's the tough thing, because most of the time when you have an intrusive thought, if it's something that kind of scares you, it's a suicidal thought. And I'm not saying I don't want people to oh, okay, I thought it was a suicidal thought, it was no big deal. There are times when you are legitimately thinking about suicide. You need to call somebody, you need to talk to somebody, you need to get with somebody. There are times where, and even if this happens, you probably should do that too, but there are times when people have a fleeting thought of what would happen if I did this, you know, and that's not necessarily the same as I got a plan to go do something. It's an intrusive thought, and then it worries you, it bothers you, it scares you.
That's
that
floating
you had
around
the
in there somewhere.
Yeah, why is that
to come
there?
Back to the forefront. Yeah,
yeah. And so what we end up doing is we push against it. We say, no, I can't have that thought. I can't have that thought. Well, the longer I'm pushing against it, the more I'm pushing against it, I'm still thinking it.
Yes.
Right. So how many times?
Hyper-focused, maybe.
Yeah, like my dad always hated the prevent defense. He said it prevented you from winning games.
Yes.
You know, and so, but there's this mindset of we gotta prevent us from
I don't want to
losing.
lose. Yeah, exactly.
And so what are you saying when you go, I don't want to lose, I don't want to lose, I don't want to lose? What are you hearing?
Lose.
Yeah. So the more I'm pushing against it and not accepting that this is a thought that I'm having, the longer it's going to be at the door. And then kind of embracing that and embracing it, not in the sense of these things are okay, but embracing it as just, this is a part of what I have to deal with. So how can I then use some things to control it and deal with it
to defeat an enemy
and handle it?
It's best to know your enemy.
That's right.
You know what you're going to keep the sports, and you watch film, you look at the thing. This is how we're going to change our defense or offense this week to handle this challenge that's in front of us. And so to some degree, embracing it, and then also.
Well, and that's a great illustration, because accepting it is, hey, we know this team's good.
Yeah.
You know, we know these things are.
Here are my deficiencies.
This is what we're going to have to deal with, and here are my deficiencies. So we're going to embrace that and figure out how we manage it. And then that third thing that they talk about is the control part of it. Then I can deal with what I need to deal with and get it out. But if I'm trying to control it by simply keeping it out and just constantly fighting, don't have that thought, I'm having that thought, you know, and it's constantly there. So I thought the other day I was talking with someone, and I had this image, and I hope it's an appropriate one, but it seemed to fit with that discussion. You ever been at a party? You know, you're having a lot of fun, you got a lot of people there, you're enjoying the party, And then all of a sudden somebody shows up. Let's just imagine, maybe nobody's ever done this, but somebody shows up and they're kind of being a Debbie Downer. You know they're the one that's going to bring the party down. They're going to talk about all the negative things. They're going to, just mess up the vibe.
I feel so attacked right now.
Yeah, not you. So they show up. Now, you can try to keep them out. You can but then all you're going to do is think about the fact that they're outside the door somewhere trying to get in. I locked it, but what if they find out how to get in? What if they do this? Or even if I bring them in and I try to ignore them, I'm thinking of them the entire time. But if I bring them in, I greet them, I talk to them, I let, whatever, I kind of get to know what the issue is that day. I've already heard them. I'm less likely to be concerned about them the rest of the time. I'm going to kind of move on with things. They're going to sit in the party and be glum, but I've already addressed it. I've already talked about it. I understand where it's at. And if push comes to shove, I'm going to ask them to leave. But generally speaking, and I've had a lot of people talk about that, once they have kind of accepted, oh, that's just a thought. It doesn't mean X, Y, Z about me. It's my thought. They accept those things in. They don't seem to have the anxiety level that they do when they're trying to keep it out. When you can allow it in, understand that it's just a thought. It doesn't mean I'm morally deficient in some way. It doesn't mean that I'm a terrible person. It doesn't mean I'm going to do this. And it doesn't even mean something bad's going to happen. If I can let that in, talk about it. I encourage you, if you're having those consistently, talk to a counselor. Mm-hmm. But if it is just one of those one-time things, hey, I had a fleeting thought, it's everybody has unwanted thoughts. Everybody sees things floating down the river. And I think it's okay.
There's an aspect of this when you accept, hey, I had that thought, then you embrace it, but then end it and put the bow on it of how can I deal with this? And if you're a Christian, and hopefully all of you are, how can I deal with this? Because Christ has enabled me to do this. I don't have to hide it. I can embrace it. I take it, every thought captive. I lay it at the cross. I find a good accountability partner or counselor.
Talked about that a couple of weeks ago.
And lay it with them and let them know. Like I said, I had those thoughts. I immediately text Ben. I told my wife, hey, help me deal with this. Let's pray through it, whatever that may be, that case. And so absolutely, I think our approach, I can speak for myself, is the opposite of that. I think you're exactly right. Hold it out, but you're hyper-focused on it. Whereas this is a process to kind of relieve yourself of that burden.
When it comes to what are some things that you can do, one, obviously talk to somebody if these things are continuing to happen. Might be a minister, might be a counselor, whatever, depending on what the need is and how deep the need is. Some of the simple things when you're attempting to control or attempting to understand it is write it down. Write some of those thoughts down that you're having. Kind of evaluate those things. Does this seem like something that's going to actually happen versus what I'm afraid will happen? So there's kind of this thought of on the one hand and on the other. On the one hand, this is a thought I'm having. I'm worried that this might happen. On the other hand, this is going to happen. And those are two different things. Mm-hmm. How many times is a dental visit, you worry about it more than... And it's the worry is worse than the actual thing. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of times what's going on.
Well, even thinking your response out. I know that I've tried to get in the practice of, even when I go down the rabbit holes of this might happen, then I still control how I respond to the most chaotic situation, even though that might not be the most likely outcome. But how is my attitude? What do
I control? What is it that I do control? And so some breathing exercises. One of the things, and I tell this story with some hesitancy, but when I was growing up, there was a girl that went to church with us that I thought was a pretty girl. Okay. And I remember getting up to speak and thinking the very theologically sound thought of, she'll be impressed with my sermon. And that's what I was, I just thought that. Well, I got to the end of the lesson and she came up and reminded me that I said like 35 times. So when she did, kind of crushed me at first. But what happened was I recognized that I was saying when I was talking. And I didn't immediately stop. It's not something you immediately stop, but just like this, if you recognize that you're having those and that they're out of place, try to recognize as you go along, you catch them sooner, and then you try to stay, like if you have a compulsion with it, if I've recognized, okay, that's that thought, but I want to do this compulsion to make myself feel better, try to extend as far as you can. If it's usually you do it immediately, try to think a little bit further. So that's what I started doing with was I might catch that I was doing it in the moment, but I would still do it. Then I started having the urge to do it, and I'd catch it earlier. And then I might still say it later on, but I was kind of catching it after I said it. And then I started catching it as I said it, and then I started catching it. I stopped doing it altogether. And so the same kind of system in that I'm seeing that I'm having this urge and I want to do this compulsion, and maybe letting that compulsion ride a little longer, putting some space in between the thought and the compulsion, and you realize, oh, I can manage without that compulsion. So those are some things that might get you started, but not likely to be an all-in-all fix. So there are people out there who can help you. Medication sometimes helps with that as well. And so I hope that some of those thoughts will help get you in the right train.
And we've also given you how you can know you're a rookie preacher by thinking anything you're going to say is going to impress anybody. So,
that's so true.
As we have said bye to that many, many years ago, like I know nothing I'm going to do is going to impress anybody. So we're giving all kinds of knowledge out today. Right. We are very thankful for Challenge Youth Conference continued support of this podcast and their partnership in raising funds for St. Jude through the Staying Alive Dodgeball Tournament. The purpose of Challenge Youth Conference is to meet the needs of our church teenagers who are growing up in a society that is often indifferent to living a life for Christ. CYC's mission is to present a program utilizing solid and sound scriptural emphasis. Our vision is to maintain a positive program which empowers our teenagers with sound teaching that challenges and encourages them to live their lives for Christ. CYC Dallas will be on the weekend of January 13th through the 15th, and the Pigeon Forge dates are February 24th through the 26th. You can email info@cyconline.com or go to cyconline.com to learn more information. We hope to see you there. And this question today is brought to you by the Staying Alive Disco Dodgeball Tournament. There will be trauma. The question today, Ben, is the last episode we talked about our favorite Fun Sing songs, which once again we've been told for years or asked for years what the words are, what the hand motions are, and at Maywood we recorded those. So benandtravis.com/funsing, all one word. You can find those videos with the lyrics and the hand motions and all the good stuff. So go check it out. But the question of the day is this: what's your least favorite?
Stirring the Purple Soup.
Stirring the Purple Soup.
That's it. Stirring the Purple Soup. That one gets requested a lot.
All the time.
But it has never been.
And now it's going to be
favorites.
Requested even more.
I don't understand it, but it's just stirring the purple soup with a little cha-cha in the middle.
Yeah.
And it just didn't make, I don't know why it was everybody's favorite.
Doesn't fire you up.
It is. That's it.
Yeah. So mine is, I'm going to feel even worse because it is a religious song that people want to sing. A bunchy bunchy.
Oh, yeah.
I love Jesus, a bunchy bunchy.
Yeah, potato chip.
It's not the Jesus bunchy bunchy part. It's the potato chip song. And I think, once again, it goes back to this is always somebody's song. And so sometimes I use the excuse, like people at Riverside are like, do the potato chip song. It's like, it's not my song. Can't do it.
It's not mine.
It's somebody else's, which none of these are ours by any means. But I do use that as an excuse. So
Sloppy Joe.
But the chips, the crunchy. Yeah. I do not like that song. It's like basic, almost despise, and that's not healthy. But there you go. That's my answer. My least favorite one.
Yeah.
We don't get asked to do that a lot. Riverside, I get asked to do that one a lot.
I forgot to do that one at camp this year, but you probably didn't.
Not do it. I probably remembered, and I just didn't mention. Because you came what song should we do? Let's add some lists. I'm not saying that.
Not doing it.
I didn't mention the Purple Soup either.
But somebody else did.
But somebody did. But we appreciate it. Hopefully this helps. I love these practical episodes where we come on and you just hit us with the good stuff, Ben.
Well, I attempt to. I hope it's helpful to somebody.
So make sure you're getting your Staying Alive Disco Dodgeball Tournament teams assembled. Maybe that's
close.
Maybe that would be a great mascot. Maybe you could be the Avengers.
Yeah.
And each one of you dress up as an Avenger, modesty in all things, of course.
That's
so
right.
Take it easy.
Thanks for being with us for this episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast. Be sure to download our free ebook, 28 Days of Focused Living, at benandtravis.com and receive all of our Helping Healing and Humor extra content directly in your inbox. We look forward to having you join us at the same Ben and Travis time, same Ben and Travis channel.